we were all going direct to heaven, or we were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present that some of the noisiest authorities insist on it being received for good and evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. It was the year of our Lord, 1775. In 1775, Alexander Stuart and William Letcher were both living in Virginia. They did not know each other, but their stories which you're about to hear. The next year, Thomas Paine would write the famous words, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in the crisis shrink from the service of his country, but he who stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered, yet we have a consolation with us that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. Sheer dearness only that gives us everything its value. Heaven only knows how to put the proper price upon its goods, and freedom should not be lightly rated." So the stone marker over here was put on William Letcher's grave by his daughter before her death in 1845. After William Letcher was killed, which I'll get to in a minute, his wife, Elizabeth Perkins Letcher, the Stuarts just loved to name everybody the same thing. Alexander, Archibald, Elizabeth. But this little girl, Bethania, was just a baby. And George Harston came over with his militia and took Mrs. Letcher and her daughter back, and he married her. He had 12 children with her. If you know anything about Hartsville and Henry County, all those Harstons, not Harstons, they all descend from, I think, her. William Letcher's wife was Bethania, the little girl I was talking about. She'll go on to marry David Pannell, and she'll have 2 children. William Letcher Pannell, if you've ever seen Pannell knitting, that's his crowd. And Elizabeth Letcher Pannell Stuart, who is Jeb Stuart's mother. Now, is anybody confused as I am? William Letcher was born in 1750, I believe, north of Richmond on the James River. He was the second son of Giles and Hannah Letcher. He was described as a man of fine appearance and greatly beloved and esteemed. On November the 20th, 1778, William Letcher married Elizabeth Perkins and moved to what is today Patrick County, but then it's Henry County. So we were in Henry County when all this I'm telling you about happened. She had grown up near Perkins Ferry, Pennsylvania County. The Letchers produced many important people. The first governor, the Civil War governor of Virginia, was John Letcher, and this is what he wrote in 1856. He said, "William Letcher chose for his residence a spot in the southwest corner of Patrick County called the Hollow. It derives its name from a circular bend which the mountains make around it. The Blue Ridge makes a semicircular sweep halfway around it on the west, Slate Mountain and Little Mountain on the eastern side, south, and the Arrowhead River, whose waters as clear and crystal and swift as an arrow shot from the bow." Boy, he got a little purple prose going, didn't he? Traversed the whole valley from north to south and empty into the Yadkin. On one of those gentle swelling hills that lifts its head on the banks of the stream, William Letcher established his home. The following year, in 1779, William Letcher appears on Captain David Carlin's Henry County Militia. The thing you read and learn about Jeb Stuart is that William Letcher, in every biography about Jeb Stuart, he gets a promotion. In the first biography of Jeb Stuart, he's Captain William Letcher. In the next book, he's Colonel William Letcher. And I'm amazed he's not President William Letcher by the time we get to the last biography. But I hate to tell you all, he was merely Corporal William Letcher. In August 1779, William Letcher was recommended to the governor of Virginia as a commissioner of the peace. Among any prominent persons around that time, of course, is Abraham Lincoln, and Patrick Henry, and Arcadius Hughes, and and John Marr, who was apparently the reason Letcher was here, who's the land developer. Letcher took the oath of office as Justice of the Peace on November 25th, 1779. The governor of Virginia, I think at that point, was a fellow named Jefferson. You might have heard of him. On March the 21st, 1780, Elizabeth Perkins Letcher gave birth to her first child. She's going to have a lot of Harstons after a while, but the first one was Bethania Letcher, and that's, of course, how Jeb Stuart would end up on this property. Bethania's daughter, Jeb Stuart's mother, wrote William Letcher, he had the promise of long years of happiness and usefulness and domestic felicity, but a serpent lurked in his path, for whom he felt too great a contempt to take any precaution. The clouds of war reached the home of William and Elizabeth Letcher in the summer of 1780, with tragic results in the form of Tories, those who were loyal to the British. John Adams said of the Tories, "The Tory here is the most despicable animal in creation. Spiders, toads, and snakes are their only proper enemy." The same day that Bethania was born, the aforementioned Thomas Jefferson, a few years from writing that declaration you probably heard of, wrote to Mr. Preston in Montgomery County. He said, "I'm sorry to hear there are persons in your quarter so far discontented with the present government who combined it with its enemies to destroy it." In March of 1780, the British, of course, began a siege of Charleston, South Carolina. This is a change in their strategy, and they're going to come up through the Carolinas. When they come up through the Carolinas, the local Tories are going to get routed. You have a large British army nearby, that's what happened. No less than Lord Cornwallis himself said, "In a civil war, there is no admitting of neutral characters. Those who are not clearly with us must be considered against us. As to be disarmed and every measure taken to prevent their being able to do mischief." Nathaniel Greene, who was commanding the Continental troops in the Southern campaign, said, "The whole country is in danger of being laid waste by the Whigs and the Tories, who pursue each other as much as relentless fury as beasts of prey." Now, I think we often think about the American Revolution in 1775 and 1776, but now it's 1780, and the Revolution is going to continue on until about 1783. Jeb Stuart's mother wrote of her grandfather, "He was very active in hunting for the Tories in their hiding places. He would frequently go alone, armed only with a shotgun, into the most inaccessible recesses of the mountains, exploring every hiding place. He knew it was the Tories who concealed themselves in the daytime and came forth in the darkness." William Letcher had proclaimed that he would lay down his life before one of them would lay his finger on his property. This comment is going to cost him. We think that one night, a Tory, probably from nearby Surrey County, came up here and set William Letcher's smokehouse on fire. And when Letcher came out, one of the Tories yelled to him, "You will see me again." There's lots of tradition about what happens. But on August the 2nd, 1780, a stranger comes to the cabin of William and Elizabeth Perkins Letcher. Mr. Letcher is out in the field. The stranger says that he wants to see him and asks where he is. She says he'll be back in a little while. When Letcher entered his home, the man identified himself as Nichols, a Surrey County man, a local Tory leader, and said, "I demand you in the name of His Majesty." And before William Letcher could do anything, Nichols shot him dead. The Tory fled the home, leaving the dying patriot in the arms of his wife, and William Letcher knew exactly who had been responsible for his death. The Tories were very prominent in this part of the world, and his death caused quite a reaction. On August the 6th, Colonel Walter Crockett up in Wythe County said he believed that the murders were conducted by Meeks and Nichols, and he assembled 250 men at Fort Chiswell, and they marched to find the Tories. We don't know exactly what happened to some of these guys, but the Tories, as a rule, it doesn't end well for them. James Boyd, where's Mike at? Mike is actually about James Boyd. James Boyd's pension application states that Nichols and others murdered Letcher, and another account tells of 9 prisoners who were captured, Nichols being one of them, and they were hung in consequence of appearing they had been involved in this crime. For years, the Stuart family referred to this place as the drumhead. You'll see in the letters they talk about the drumhead, because they had a drumhead court and executed people. Now, I don't think that actually happened here, but you tell a story of the family. I tell more stories about Jimmy Williams sitting there, where you would think he's a legend right now. But Letcher's murder causes the Patriots to be made examples of. And like I said, so in August of 1780, Lord Cornwallis is going to defeat Horatio Gates at the Battle of Camden, South Carolina. The British move into the nest of hornets, known as Charlotte. And yes, that's where their basketball team gets its name. Nest of hornets. All this is going to change, though, on October 7th, when the Patriots of the Overmountain Inn take out Ferguson and Kings Mountain. In 1781, the year dawning brightly for the Patriots' cause, Daniel Morgan is going to beat Bannister Tarleton at the Cowpens. And George Washington said of this, "It's defeated everywhere. I will make my stand for liberty among the Scots-Irish and my native Virginia." So that leads us to the other man in this story, and I won't talk about him long, but Alexander Stuart was Jeb Stuart's paternal great-grandfather. He lived in Augusta County, and he was in Stevens' militia. He ends up at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, where Nathaniel Greene is not going to beat Cornwallis, but he's going to hurt him bad. He's going to hurt him real bad. Alexander Stuart is an interesting guy. He ends up marrying 3 times. His middle marriage is where Jeb Stuart's family descends from, but he's in Samuel McDowell's regiment. The militia rises to the rank of major. He actually is an officer. He continued his service on to the end of the war. He's going to be horse shot out from under him at Guilford Courthouse, and he's going to be captured. I think the British left him with the Quakers and the Friends there, and he's going to survive all of this and live on. If you know anything about the Revolution, what Nathaniel Greene did was he had 3 lines. It's the same thing Daniel Morgan did with the Cowpens. He would have a line of militia, they'd fire, they'd fall back. The next line of militia would fire, they'd fall back. By the time the British got to the main Continental Army, they were tired, and then they were hitting the main guys. And this is the strategy they started using. He worked at the Cowpens, and he worked a little bit at Guilford, but not as good as the family Greene would have lost. As I said, Major Stuart was wounded. He saw his son, who would be Jeb's grandfather, saw it happen, and another guy who saw it happen was a guy named Sam Houston, who would be the ancestor of the famous Texan. It said Major Alexander Stuart was mounted on a beautiful mare. The shot was fatal to her on the retreat. When she failed, the major was seized and surrendered. His captors plundered him and left him standing in his cocked hat, his shirt, and his shoes. He was unwounded. Now here we go again. Jeb Stuart gets great-granddaddy promotions. Supposedly, Lord Cornwallis himself was so impressed with what Alexander Stuart did that he gave him his sword back and released him. Well, I don't necessarily think that's what happened, but it's a good story. It's a good story. So, they left him, I think, with the Quakers, and Lord Cornwallis is going to move on to a little place called Yorktown, where he's going to be caught by the French and George Washington and forced to surrender. But the revolution doesn't end just then, it keeps going. The Revolution Treaty doesn't end until 1783, 3 years after William Letcher was killed. 4 years after that, 7 years after William Letcher was killed, the Constitution of the United States was written, and we have a democratic republic because of that. So let me leave you with this. We're going to echo Jonathan Edwards, the famous preacher, and maybe Ronald Reagan a little bit about a shining city on a hill. But I started out with Charles Dickens, so I'll end with Charles Dickens. He ended A Tale of Two Cities, and I think this is what maybe Alexander Stuart and William Letcher would think if they could tell us. Dickens wrote, "I see a beautiful city and a brilliant people rising from this abyss, and in their struggles to truly be free and their triumphs and defeat through long, long years to come, I see the evil of this time and the previous time, which is the natural birth, gradually making expiation for itself and wearing out. I see the lives for which I lay down my life, peaceful, useful, prosperous, and happy. And I see that child who lay upon her bosom and bore my name, a man wending his way in the path of life which was once mine. I see him winning it so well that my name is illustrious by the light of his. I see the blocks I threw upon it faded away, and I see him foremost among judges and honored men, bringing a boy of my name with a forehead that I know, and golden hair to this place, and then fair to look upon it, not a trace of this day's disfigurement. And I hear him tell the child my story with a tender and faltering voice. It is a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest than I go to than I have done. You rest right with you. Thank you very much. Anybody got any questions? Or do y'all need some more? Well, I'll be here. I have books behind me. If any of you want to talk or ask questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you. And I really appreciate all y'all coming out. This is a tremendous crowd. I'm amazed y'all found this place. I really am. So, thank you.